So, what is it about the number 3 and the Sega Mega Drive that left me feeling so disappointed? Well, in this video, we'll be taking a look at the third installments of some of the console's most iconic games. During the 16-bit era, we were introduced to some of the greatest franchises in video game history, so let's see why some of the third chapters didn't quite live up to expectations. Often regarded as one of the greatest arcade games of all time, Golden Axe was released in 1989. The game followed the adventures of our three heroes as they took on the evil Death Adder. The Mega Drive port of the original was a fantastic achievement, capturing the look and feel of the arcade game and even expanding the story with an extra stage. This was followed up by Golden Axe 2, a console-only sequel that did little to innovate but provided a solid continuation of the series. As we begin our journey through the lands of Golden Axe 3, we find a game that's a shadow of its former glory. Released in 1993, this sequel had a reputation to live up to, but sadly, it failed to capture what made the series so appealing. The game brought back the hack-and-slash action we knew, but with little innovation. It was more of the same, which we had already seen with Golden Axe 2. There was a real lack of any progress in design and gameplay, and by the third game in a series, you'd expect more. Visually, Golden Axe 3 felt like a step back. The graphics were very plain and failed to push the Mega Drive's abilities, considering the game was released in 1993. The game looked gritty, with rigid characters and choppy movements. A common trait in beat-em-up games is the repetition in enemy design, which is to be expected. The original Golden Axe dealt with this by creating memorable scenes and set pieces, so defeating the same enemies was enjoyable throughout. Unfortunately, the combat here is so sluggish that it feels like the same process over and over again, and it becomes dull very quickly. The attempt to switch up the roster with characters like Kronos and Proud Cragger fell flat, as they lacked the personality of the original cast. Removing Gilius Thunderhead and bringing in replacements for Axe Battler and Tyrus Flare was a big mistake. The character designs were poor, with enemy sprites lacking the menacing designs of the likes of Death Adder and the Bad Brothers. Even the knights in this game lacked their intimidating presence, appearing more like cheap imitations. The chargeable magic attacks from Golden Axe 2 were removed, which were one of the key improvements over the first game in the series. It felt like adjusting the system again was a step back rather than forward. And what did they do to the magic animations? Some of them look like an old TV that's not been tuned in properly. Golden Axe 3's branching levels were the only real sign of innovation, yet this couldn't make up for the game's deeper issues. Hindered by poor collision detection and lackluster level design, it failed to recapture the magic of its predecessors. In addition to these problems was the limited release, available only in Japan and through the Sega channel in North America. This restricted its accessibility and contributed to the game's underwhelming impact. Sega's answer to Capcom's final fight came in the form of Streets of Rage, a series that quickly became the benchmark in the beat-em-up genre. In 1992, Sega raised the bar with Streets of Rage 2, which is considered one of the best games in the genre. Taking to the streets for a third time should have been one of the greatest experiences on the Mega Drive. Unfortunately, it was an encounter that ended up being one of the biggest disappointments on the console. The third installment in the beloved beat-em-up series promised to elevate the familiar experience with new features, yet it stumbled in areas where it previously flourished. The introduction of new gameplay mechanics aimed to innovate, but the execution felt lackluster. The combat, while faster, lost the satisfying impact of its predecessor, leaving encounters feeling rushed and less gratifying. 3 of the characters made a return from Streets of Rage 2, but the absence of Adam and Max from the roster was unforgivable. Yuzo Koshiro, the acclaimed composer of the series' memorable soundtrack, ventured into experimental territory with the score. This bold move resulted in a soundtrack that, while ambitious, failed to capture the essence of the iconic music the series was known for. The game's localization introduced its own set of hurdles. The Western release suffered from increased difficulty spikes, censorship, and character redesigns. Axel's iconic look from the first two games was gone, as he appears to have only found a yellow shirt in his wardrobe. Perhaps Cody from Final Fight knows where he can pick up another t-shirt. While Streets of Rage 3 was not a disastrous sequel, it didn't come close to Streets of Rage 2. The overall presentation felt unfinished, and replacing Adam with a boxing kangaroo was a big mistake. Spinning back onto the scene in 1994, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 arrived with the promise of more innovation. But not all sequels race to the finish line with the same level of speed. Things don't begin well, as we are presented with a 3D version of Sonic that completely spoils the intro. While Sonic 3 introduced Knuckles and brought back the fast-paced gameplay, it also faced development hurdles. The game was split from Sonic and Knuckles due to time constraints, resulting in what felt like an incomplete experience. At times, it feels like the game just stops and starts too often, destroying the fast-flowing pace that Sonic is known for. The soundtrack, a core part of Sonic's identity, had the issues surrounding Michael Jackson's involvement, and the subsequent changes after his departure left fans with a score that felt unfamiliar. And what happened to the invincibility music? Expectations were sky high, and while the game did have some impressive innovations, it lacked the magic that made its predecessors stand out. I felt the series reached its peak in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and apart from Sonic Mania and Generations, nothing has ever really been close to it. Sonic 3 was a good game, but it couldn't quite escape the shadow of Sonic's previous adventures. It's a reminder that even the fastest heroes can face bumps in the road, and this would be the first of many for Sega's Blue Blur. During the 16-bit era, these franchises defined the Mega Drive experience. These entries failed to meet the level of expectation. A combination of technical and legal issues, overambition, and a lack of fresh ideas made these third entries into three big disappointments. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below and subscribe to the channel for more retro gaming content.